Hello and welcome to the Friendship News Hour book review of Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari. Today we are going to start with part 3, The Unification of Humankind, chapter 9, The Arrow of History, and chapter 10, The Scent of Money. My name is Frank Huerta. I am joined, as always, by Alex Kenzie. Hello, Alex.
Hello, hello. That was a great intro, man. It was firm and informative.
I appreciate that. So what'd you think of these two?
It was some information, man. I liked it. I feel like he starts to touch on the things that perhaps like helped keep society in check, as different religions and different ideas and myths, all kind of started to verge away from each other, and you had all these different people. Like, what are the common things you need to? What became the common things to continue to bring people together and let us communicate one way or the other?
Yeah, definitely. Before we get started on these two chapters, let's take a brief look back at our previous review of Chapter 7, Memory Overload, and Chapter 8. There it is. There is no justice in history. So Chapter 7 was basically about um, as the agricultural revolution began to bear its fruits, we multiplied by a large margin, and we lost the ability to form relationships with everybody in our bands. So we made hierarchies and we made structures of living, and as that progressed, we created ways to remember things that our brains simply did not have the ability to. This led to the invention of what they call partial scripts, such as mathematics and the binary code that allowed us to begin to think more or less as human filing cabinets and bureaucrats rather than just, you know, what a human being would think of without in the absence of these two partial scripts. So it basically was talking about memory and how we needed to find a way to store down information. And then it led to chapter 8. So this is still part of the agricultural revolution. I missed the connection from the memory portion to this portion, but it begins to talk about injustices in history. And the central theme around the injustices of history are that the people committing the atrocities had justification for them because they felt their way of thinking, their way of life, and their beliefs came about naturally, as if they were bestowed upon them by God, or some essence of that metaphor. So it talked a lot about American slavery, talked a lot about how we make justifications for the characteristics of Africans being good slaves, and that's why we decided to pick them out, and all these things that freed up in our mind the ability to do horrific things. So that was the essence of that chapter. That all these imagined hierarchies, all these things that we believe collectively in our mind, came about more or less by by simply uh, by simply just thinking that it was the way to be, and that if it was anything else, then it would be that way. So um, let's bring it back to chapter 9, part 3 of the unification of humankind, and chapter 9 is titled The Arrow of History. And basically it poses the question, is there a path in history? Is there a way forward through history that we can see? And the author answers it yes and no, and boils it down to that our cultures are trying to constantly reconcile for the contradictions inside of them, and that is what fuels change, right? um so like it talks about it, contradictions in socialism. I don't know if you caught that. They talked about the Soviet Union, and they said that contradictions of egalitarian society by means of totalitarian brutalism. Um, it talked about Democrats in modern U.S. politics that want a more just society, even if it means a large spike in taxes. And by the same token, Republicans in the United States want to maintain individual freedom, even if it means that the gap between rich and poor grows wider. So it talks about the contradictions of, freedom by means of this, or equality by means of this. And those two things, trying to bring them in the middle, although it happens like magnets and we almost have no ability to do that, that force inward creates change forward. And I think that's what he kind of means by the arrow of history.
It's funny that our country, just as an example, like literally the founding document is about, or includes very heavily, equality and freedom. And right as this chapter gets going, he like Professor Harari is basically like, yeah, they contradict each other. It's not,
Yeah.
they're not one
Yeah.
and the
Right. And he says that as we've grown to witness these contradictions, that we've created a phrase for them called cognitive dissonance.
same.
Right. And it's the idea that that cultures must hold two ideas at once, that we need to understand that there's consequences to what we do and when we try to do them. And it's those consequences, that tension between the things that we want and the things that we have to sacrifice for them, meeting in the middle, and then driving forward. um so yeah, I thought that was a cool idea there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's funny that things a culture would have had to deal with 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago are they're different, but the same idea that we still face today.
Yeah, so it talks about how, you know this is a more it's probably more or less a human, organic experience, because for most of history we were isolated, right? Like if you were in Rome, you're completely isolated from India or China or Russia or Afghanistan or even, Germany, because of your geographical location, and how hard it would be to get there. So even though there's no connection between like a Rome, and they use Teotihuacan,
Yokan, yeah.
yeah, um, as being these two examples of having leaders overthrown at the same time, but being worlds apart. And so the cultural conflicts within these nations caused this revolution, and it happened separately, but at the same time. Um, so that was a cool other concept too of chapter 7. And
Think about
um,
life then when like you would be Roman and you are Roman, and that you have no other influence from anything else. Like think about like if I'm an Ohioan, you're a Californian, and that's all you fucking know and love and hold true.
yeah,
It's so
it is
it's such
weird.
a weird, and I feel like today, especially with social media and all these other outlets, but like you're influenced by so many different things. You can travel to so many different places, and it's not we've like law. I mean, I guess that's what America is, though. It's like the melting pot, which makes us great, but you really don't have that at all anymore, though. Now that you can travel everywhere.
Yeah, right. And with all this tension that's met in the middle, and people that want to, that are trying to combine these two contradicting ideas into one.
Mhm.
um, the author makes this point that the, there has to be something as a baseline that allows for this change to occur. Um, and he makes the point that it would be money that does this.
Mhm.
And he even said that, um,
Or it's one of the things that does this.
well,
One
yes and no, but he said it coincided with this sort of organic human phenomenon, and that it's universal because he even made a point that like Cortez went and captured Mexico in search of gold, and that Osama bin Laden hated everything about America except her almighty dollar, right? Like he was very fond of money. He's a incredibly wealthy person,
Mhm.
and so it kind of said that this is more or less the universal equalizer of this phenomenon of the tension of ideas, contradicting ideas, progressing forward change. Also came with the advent of money to facilitate it, and how fragile it is because it's all in our mind. It's all like money, for example, used to be the US dollar used to be backed up by the gold standard, right? The currency of the United States is backed up by a material worth of value.
Right.
And now it's it's just a fiat currency, which is literally the definition of fiat currency is that it exists in your mind and is backed up by it's backed up by the collective agreement that this currency has value.
Yeah.
Um, so like we don't even fake it anymore, it's just blatant imagined
Yeah, and
stuff that has tremendous power over all of us. And it starts to make the case in chapter 10, The Scent of Money, that it is money is something that is transformed power, basically. It has taken power and brought it into a new material, tangible weapon that if you possess it, now you hold the cards to your future and somebody else does not. Um,
which is terrifying from today's standpoint. When I read that, I thought the exact same. And if you think about that from today, he says that today the sum of all the money in the world is around $60 trillion. Yet the total sum of all like coins and banknotes, any kind of paper currency, is
mhm.
less than 6 trillion.
Yeah.
More than 90% of the power in the world is
Mhm.
fairy dust.
Yeah. We talked about it on a podcast a couple of days ago, but like talking about the money of today's billionaires and millionaires, or like Jeff Bezos, and you say he's
Mhm.
worth, I don't know, what's he worth, $1 trillion or something? I don't even know how much he's worth. An unfathomable number. But it's like you said, it's not like there's cash backing up that wealth, that
Right.
value. It's the value of something that he owns, and that if he decided to walk away, somebody would buy it for that much,
Right.
right? So yeah, it is. It's all more or less imagined wealth,
Yeah.
but that is real and that's backed up by centuries of markets and doing business and this right like where it started. The chapter 10, The Scent of Money, it starts by Hernan Cortez, and he gives a quote for Cortez as he goes to um, Mexico, and they ask him why they're so interested in gold, because to the native people it didn't mean currency. And so he said, I and my companion suffer a disease of the heart that can only be cured with gold. Right? These guys had a lust for gold, for money, for what it represented. It existed in their mind as the most important thing because of what it represented. Um, and it makes the point again that if you were in a small community like the natives in Mexico, you were more or less self-sufficient. You could trade and you could barter, and you had people who had skills that could do this and that, and you didn't need a whole lot because you didn't have a whole lot to provide for.
Right.
So money wasn't an idea that these people held at all. Really, it was more or less like, oh, I do this, I do my part because I know they're going to back me up. But the larger a society gets, the more that becomes a unsustainable reality, right? They talk about how central bartering on a large scale has failed massively in the Soviet Union. And it said that, what it was supposed to be was, I do my part, somebody else does their part, we bring it to the middle and it gets distributed to everybody. And what happened was, I'm going to do as little as I can to get by and take as much as I can receive.
Yeah.
And um, love the idea, but I think it's apparent that there needs to be some sort of tangible or even intangible but accepted mode of currency, of money, to make this kind of thing happen. Because if not, then even though it does spawn a lot of greed, and there's definitely a ton that goes wrong with it, I think there is no other real alternative. For example, if you look at what it was like to price some things in the Soviet Union, like what does it cost? What does it cost that mic right there that you're speaking on? Mine's like $65.
This one's 450.
Okay, yeah. See, why does yours cost more than mine?
Because it's cooler, honestly.
Yeah, well, right. And if you listen to this, you'll probably think that his voice sounds a little bit clearer and crisper than mine, and that's fine. We're still audible, but
no, that's just because I edited the podcast, so I just make myself sound better.
But the material that your microphone is made of is of higher quality, and it performs the task better than mine does. So they can put it out at the market for more than what mine cost, and they will probably get the money for it. But that is because you've decided to pay that money for it based on your options and what it can do for you. If you try to price items artificially, what you're trying to do is literally hold like 1,000 pounds of sand in two hands. And every time one keeps falling, you have to pick up, because you can never have the ability to know what everything costs. It's impossible.
How did that work then? Do you know, like in this, like
corruption, mass corruption.
If you go to the store, I'm just curious. If you go to the store, like, would it just be like milk, or would it be like
no food?
But was there like one thing of everything that, and you would just like receive that as part of that whole communism?
I don't know the inner workings of socialist countries, but it's essentially one entity, the state, controls all and brings all into the middle. And you have so many bureaucratic sections all over the place, and those things report upwards. And this person can't let this person down, and that person can't let that person down. That person needs this thing, this person needs this thing, and it's just this big fucking stupid mix of all this stuff gets corrupted, gets jammed up the middle of bureaucracy, to the point where nobody knows what the hell is going on. Nobody's being able to eat because nobody's been able to grow food because everybody's incompetent, and they're not letting the people who know what they want to do it.
Yeah.
And just another good example of that is Zimbabwe, when not too long ago they decided that they were going to forcefully remove all of the white farmers from the land and replace them with black farmers to make up for whatever it was that they did. I'm not privy to all the atrocities of Zimbabwe, but that's what they did. And nobody was able to grow food because nobody knew what the hell that they were doing, and their currency went into hyperinflation. And you can now buy like a $1 trillion Zimbabwe note on Amazon for like $20.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't. It has no value.
Yeah. Right.
Um, so when you try to control those levers, particularly with socialism, you don't allow for, your intent is to make sure that the resources are used to their maximum ability. But the only way to do that is to motivate people through the only way that I think I know how. And I think what this chapter is trying to say is that the natural progression of things happen because of the motivation of a third party, if you will. I have one thing, you have one thing. This third party is on a sliding scale, and wherever we meet at in the middle is where we allow for. And this is earned or unearned or scarce or available and unavailable, but there's a in theory, in our imagination, a finite amount of it, or that we can have or lose or whatever. It exists in our head as a solid idea. So after it talks about central bartering and how it's not, it in practice didn't work out very well. It basically just said, it made the point again that money is in our imagination. And it does make a good point on money, because I think what we think of as money is just like cash, right? When you think of money, you think of money, right? What you have to spend if you need it or whatever. But it's also so much more than that. So much. My economics professor, my undergrad, he used to call it cash, funny green money.
Yeah.
He used to tell us all the time, like, this isn't money. This is what I'm holding here. It's not money. And he would tell us all the time. He said, it's currency, and it's good currency, because if you go to anywhere in the world, they're going to tell you is good. It was his line all the time. They're going to tell you is good because it's good everywhere because of the currency and what it's backed up by. But it's not money. Like, your money is what you own, your house, your boat, your cars, your collection of baseball cards, your whatever it is that you own is money. And I think that this chapter basically just gave example after example after example of
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
plight of money and what money is.
Yeah. In the past, he mentions it's been shells, cattle,
Right.
skin, grain,
In
salt,
in
beads.
um in the Holocaust, it was cigarettes.
Yeah, yeah. The numbers he gave was crazy. Like in concentration camps, it said bread was 12 cigarettes, 10 ounces of butter was 30 cigarettes. A watch would range from 80 to 200, and
Yeah.
if you wanted a quarter gallon of alcohol, it was 400.
Mm-hmm.
How are
Yeah.
they getting cigarettes in concentration
There's
camps?
a really good um, book about that, or article or something. I forget what it was. I have to look it up. But like, it was just like rations that they would get,
Gotcha. Yeah,
and always came with cigarettes. I think
gotcha.
it's an
Okay.
article. It is an article. Yeah, because
Okay.
we also read about this. Um, but yeah, it was just basically rations that they would get, and they would hold on to them, and it
Mhm.
would be their currency, and that's how they did it.
It's like prison. Yeah, same.
Prison, right? Prison has the same kind of vibe when you're talking about currency. Things mean what they mean in there, and um, so yeah, I mean, that was basically the chapter. Honestly, it didn't get into like greed or corruption very much. It didn't get into any of those themes when you think of money. It just made the point that, bad or good or otherwise, we have been and probably always will be motivated by money,
It's
in whatever form it is. What's that?
it's a psychological construct.
Yeah, 100%, 100%, all made up on our minds. But we're, if history tells us anything, we're not giving that up.
No, yeah,
And so yeah, like I said, good, bad, good or otherwise. And if you have a better idea of what we should do, I'm all ears. But it seems to me that this is it.
yeah. Seems like it works, man. He even has a cool little story about Christians and Muslims in the early days. Christians used to, even the bishops of the city would, because of where they lived, would pay with a coin that on the coin said, "There is one God and Allah is his prophet." And it's like, that's like totally against your whole religion and what you're
Yeah,
doing. But like, money's money, baby,
yeah.
and it's everywhere.
And it also talked about how a prostitute would work for money, that she would then go and pay for what were those things they had paid for it back in the day to get them to heaven?
Oh, that Martin Luther had a problem with.
Yeah, well, if you know it, you probably yelling it in your head right now. But I want to say tithings, but it's not tithings. It's and it's not reparations. It's I can't.
I'm looking it up for it. Uh,
Not penance.
Indulgence. Yeah, the sale.
Indulgences.
Yep.
Yes.
Pardons for sins.
Yes. Yes. So she would work for her indulgences with indulgences. So, um, so yeah, it is pretty wild. It is pretty wild. Um,
I think you're right, though. It'll always be something in our society, whether it become, from Bitcoin to whatever the hell else. It's always something that allows people that may not have the same beliefs, cultures, religion, even from anywhere in the same part of the world, you can still figure out how to do business, how to get what you need one way or the other with
mhm.
it.
Agreed. And I think that nothing is perfect, but I definitely think we got the best thing going on still with our system and how we allow people to operate in money.
Sure.
I think there's definitely a ton of restrictions and it's hard. Um, and I guess those things come out of, they come out of a good place, right? Something bad happens, and you got, like, for example, when that whole Bernie Madoff thing went down back in, like, was it 2007,
Ish. Yeah.
2008, somewhere around there. Um, it spawned, and probably like far too late, but it spawned an entire compliance industry within financial advising. So Jacqueline, my girlfriend, her first job didn't exist before Bernie Madoff, and she was just a
Really?
compliance officer um,
Wow.
for a small financial advising firm here in San Diego, and she just made sure that they were on the up and up, and she did things coordinated with different financial institutions. And but it wasn't before that greed took over, and this guy ruined a bunch of lives. And there's
Yeah.
countless examples. I've said it before, I'll say it again. If you haven't watched the smartest men in the room, smartest guys in the room, have to watch that documentary. It is bananas. um but to me, I think that's just a story of hubris and a story of the nature of human beings and their corrupt ability. But I still don't think that that's a testament against uh, the beauty that capitalism can produce. And I'm just a firm believer in it. I think it's done far more good than harm. And like I said, it's not perfect, but um, it's damn near as close as we've gotten this far.
Yeah. I don't see another system that has worked.
Yeah,
There's been many.
there has been, um, but more or less, the overlying theme of this chapter was just that it like nothing exists in our imagination for this long and this strongly if it doesn't hold tremendous power over us. And so there's probably no reason to think that. I mean, crypto, right? It's not going away. It's just evolving
Yeah,
into what we need it to evolve to.
true. I
So
got a question for you. What do you think is more powerful, religion or money?
money,
I agree.
money, 100%.
Yeah,
I Religion is motivated a lot and a lot of shit. Um, but it's also motivates a lot of good. I think money motivates all.
everyone. Yeah,
Money motivates all. And if it doesn't motivate you, or you think it doesn't motivate you, that's because you probably don't have a lot a lot of it. But I'm serious. It motivates everybody, and it motivates religions. Like they don't they don't like kneel to the altar of money, but they also collect it every time you come to church. So
true. They need money though. Don't they have one of the strongest banks? Isn't that the
yeah,
Vatican's central bank? I think they
I
don't
used to
have
have
to
a
like report.
I used to have a professor that would say, "Cash is king, and the most cash flow is the most important thing, unless you're Apple, Google, or the Vatican."
Yeah.
He says you always have to worry about cash unless you're Apple, Google, or the Vatican. Yeah,
Yep.
hilarious,
That sums it up.
hilarious. All right, well,
Uh,
that's it for this one. Let's see where we're at next time. We're still going to be on part 3, the unification of humankind. Next time is going to be probably just imperial visions. So that'll be interesting. Probably go into imperialism and colonialism and taking over countries and things like that. I'm guessing, maybe not.
ooh,
And then after that will be the law of religion. That'll be fun. And that wraps up part 3, the unification of humankind. So 2 more, and then on to part 4, which is the last part of the book, the scientific revolution. So very
I'm pumped.
excited. This is really fun.
Hell yeah. Loving it.
All right. Well, we'll see y'all next time.
Bye bye.